Robert closed the door with a lingering sense of unease. Something about Patricia's demeanor had set off alarm bells, but he dismissed the feeling as new homeowner anxiety. Unpacking boxes in his sunny kitchen, he thumbed through the leather binder she'd left. What he'd assumed would be a simple pamphlet was instead a 72-page manifesto of rules, subsections, and appendices. Mailbox hardware must be brass finish only, model CB 772 or equivalent. He read aloud, eyebrows rising. Holiday decorations permissible only between designated dates, with prior approval of design elements. The highlighted sections about his property included restrictions on everything from bird baths to the permissible height of porch furniture. Later that afternoon, Robert met his next-door neighbor, Elena Rodriguez, a kindergarten teacher who welcomed him with homemade cookies. "Your roses are beautiful," he commented, noticing her vibrant garden. Elena's smile faltered. "They're on borrowed time, I'm afraid. Patricia left a note yesterday saying they're not on the approved list." She lowered her voice. "Between us, that list changes whenever she decides something bothers her." "Is she always so?" Robert searched for a diplomatic word. "Intense," Elena supplied. "Let's just say most of us stay out of her way. The Richardsons at the end of the block fought back last year. Their mailbox was vandalized 3 times, and somehow their sprinklers malfunctioned and flooded their garage. After the 4th anonymous complaint about their teenage son's car, they moved." That evening, while arranging books on his shelves, Robert noticed Patricia walking slowly past his house again, phone in hand, taking photos of his porch light and entry stonework. When she spotted him watching through the window, she didn't look embarrassed. Instead, she nodded and made a deliberate note in her book. The next morning, Robert found an official-looking placard placed at the edge of his property. "Future site of Oak Ridge Memorial Garden," it announced. "Coming spring 2025. A smaller line indicated pending final approval. Confused, he took a photo and headed to work, resolving to ask Elena about it that evening. Returning home, Robert found the placard gone and a fresh envelope under his door. Inside was a notice about his non-conforming window treatments visible from the street. Apparent failure to install the association's required off-white blinds carried a $75 penalty. At the bottom, a handwritten note read, "The board is considering several enhancement projects for the neighborhood. Your attendance at next month's planning meeting is strongly encouraged." While making dinner, Robert's phone rang, a local number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Chen, this is Michael Bartlett from Pinnacle Realty. I understand you recently purchased the corner property on Oak Ridge Lane. I have a client who's expressed interest should you ever consider selling. They're prepared to make an extremely competitive offer, even though you've just moved in." "I'm not interested in selling," Robert replied, confused. "I just unpacked." Of course, the realtor said smoothly. "But if circumstances change, please keep us in mind. Sometimes new residents find Oak Ridge's unique culture isn't the right fit. My client is extremely motivated regarding your specific property." As Robert hung up, he noticed Patricia walking past again, pretending to check her mail while watching his house. Their eyes met briefly before she turned away, but not before Robert caught a calculating smile that sent a chill through him despite the warm evening air. Walter's warning about Patricia targeting specific properties lingered in Robert's mind as he walked home from the meeting. The night air felt heavy with unspoken tensions, the perfectly aligned street lamps casting more shadows than light. The following morning, Robert discovered his garbage cans had been mysteriously moved from their concealed location to a prominent spot beside his driveway. He returned them to their proper place, only to find another notice that evening claiming he'd repositioned sanctioned waste receptacles without authorization. "This is getting ridiculous," he muttered, adding the new $75 fine to his growing folder labeled HOA Matters. Over the weekend, Robert invited Elena for coffee on his patio. As they chatted, he noticed her gaze repeatedly drifting toward the street. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. Elena sighed. "Force of habit. Patricia has garden volunteers who report back to her. Being seen socializing with someone on her watch list isn't wise." "Her watch list?" "People who question things. The neighbor who lived here before you asked too many questions about association finances. Alina lowered her voice despite the privacy of his backyard. 3 months of harassment later, they sold for well below asking price. Monday brought a certified letter informing Robert that his satellite dish installation, performed by licensed professionals according to FCC guidelines, violated association aesthetic standards. The notice included close-up photos taken from angles that could only have been captured from within his side yard. That evening, Robert installed security cameras. Within hours, he received a text from an unknown number. Security installations require prior board approval. See Covenant Section 7.3. Disturbed but determined, Robert drove to the county records office. The clerk's expression grew sympathetic as Robert explained his situation. "You're not the first Oak Ridge resident in here," she said, pulling a thick file. "The association has filed more liens in 2 years than most do in 10. The financial documents revealed a pattern. Penalty revenue had tripled under Patricia's leadership, with most funds directed to neighborhood enhancement reserves with minimal oversight." As Robert left the building, he spotted Walter sitting alone at a cafe across the street. The elderly man waved him over, eyes darting nervously around the nearly empty space. "I wasn't sure you'd take me seriously," Walter said, stirring his untouched coffee. Patricia's husband was a real estate developer before he passed. She learned his tactics, identifies properties with potential, creates impossible situations for owners, then arranges for friendly purchases. "That can't be legal," Robert protested. Walter slid a worn leather journal across the table. "Sarah Johnson documented everything before she left. Names, dates, properties. She was building a case but ran out of resources." He tapped a page featuring a familiar address. "Your home is on her acquisition list. Has been since the previous owners listed it." Robert flipped through pages of meticulous notes detailing a systematic campaign against targeted homeowners, selective enforcement, manipulated complaints, strategic rumors affecting property values. "Why are you helping me?" Robert asked, looking up. Walter's weathered face showed a flash of determination. "My wife and I have lived here 30 years. This was a good place before Patricia. Besides," he added with a hint of defiance, "my granddaughter is an attorney specializing in housing law. She's been encouraging me to speak up." As they parted ways, Robert's phone buzzed with a new message. The HOA board had called an emergency meeting to discuss problematic elements disrupting neighborhood harmony. His attendance was strongly recommended. "Game on," Robert whispered, clutching Walter's journal as he headed home to prepare. The architectural drawings of Robert's property haunted him as he drove home. Patricia's audacity was stunning. She wasn't just harassing him. She was actively planning for his departure, treating his home as her future acquisition. His security cameras alerted him to movement at his front door the following morning. On the footage, he watched as Patricia methodically measured his porch dimensions, occasionally making notes and taking photos. When she noticed the camera, she looked directly into the lens and smiled before continuing her work unperturbed. That afternoon, Robert received an email from the board treasurer requesting verification of his property tax payments, citing concerns raised about proper ownership documentation. The request was unnecessary and inappropriate. Property tax records were public information, and the HOA had no authority to investigate his standing with the county. Ignoring the email, Robert called Alina. "Would you introduce me to other neighbors who've had issues with Patricia? I need to understand how widespread this is." Alina hesitated before agreeing. "Meet me at Westside Coffee tomorrow at noon. A few people might join us, but don't be surprised if some cancel last minute. Fear runs deep here." The coffee shop meeting proved revelatory. 3 residents showed up: Alina, a retired professor named James, and a young nurse called Mia. Each shared similar experiences: targeted enforcement, unexplained property damage, mysterious complaints from concerned neighbors. "My garden shed was reported for being 3 inches taller than regulation," James explained. "When I measured, it was exactly to code. The next day, someone had placed a concrete block under one corner, raising its height just enough to violate the rules. Mia's experience was more disturbing. After I questioned association finances at a meeting, someone reported hearing concerning noises from my townhouse. The board demanded an inspection for possible unauthorized pets. They went through every room, taking photos. A week later, I started getting calls from Patricia's son-in-law offering to buy my place. As they spoke, Robert noticed a woman at a corner table watching them intently. When their eyes met, she quickly looked away, gathering her things to leave. "That's Diane," Alina whispered, Patricia's next-door neighbor and loyal informant. That evening, Robert found his mail slot stuffed with printed copies of his social media profiles, property purchase documentation, and employment records, all public information, but assembled in a way that felt intrusive. A note attached read, "Items for upcoming resident profile review." The implied message was clear. Patricia was escalating her tactics, demonstrating her reach into his personal life. The psychological warfare was designed to make him feel exposed and vulnerable. Robert's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meeting tomorrow, 7 p.m. Not Clubhouse. 1242 Elmwood Drive. Come alone. Information you need." The address belonged to a modest home at the edge of the neighborhood. When Robert arrived the following evening, he found Walter waiting on the porch with a woman in her 30s. "My granddaughter, Ashley," Walter introduced, "the attorney I mentioned." Inside, the dining table was covered with documents, property records, board meeting minutes, financial reports, and correspondence spanning 5 years. "This isn't just harassment," Ashley explained, tapping a folder. "It's a methodical real estate scheme. Patricia isn't just a power-hungry board president. She's running a sophisticated property flipping operation using the HOA as leverage." She opened her laptop to show Robert a map of Oak Ridge Estates with several properties highlighted in red. "These are homes that have been targeted, sold under duress, and then resold at profit margins averaging 30% within 18 months. She pointed to his address, marked in yellow. "And this is their next target." The county records office felt different on Robert's second visit, less like a bureaucratic maze and more like an archaeological dig site. Armed with Ashley's guidance, he requested specific documents with newfound purpose. "I need all property transfers in Oak Ridge Estates for the past 5 years, please, and any line filings associated with the Homeowners Association." The clerk, recognizing him from his previous visit, raised an eyebrow. "Found something interesting in those files, did you?" "More than I expected," Robert replied. When the records arrived, Ashley's assertions were confirmed in stark black and white. 6 properties had been acquired through different limited liability companies, all with different names but identical formation patterns. The paper trail was deliberately complex, designed to obscure connections between buyers. "Look at this," Robert said, spreading documents across the table. The Johnson property sold at 22% below market after 9 months of escalating fines. 3 weeks later, it transferred to Oakwood Holdings for nominal consideration. 6 months after that, it sold at full market value to a new resident. The clerk leaned over his shoulder. "You know, there's someone else who might help you." Former board member who resigned last year, name's Marcus Reed, said he couldn't stomach the direction things were taking. That afternoon, Robert and Ashley met Marcus at his law office downtown. The silver-haired attorney seemed relieved to finally share what he knew. "I joined the board to help improve the neighborhood, not to assist in a property scheme," he explained, unlocking a file cabinet. "Patricia approached me to handle some of the transactions, claiming they were legitimate foreclosure acquisitions. When I discovered the pattern of targeted harassment preceding each sale, I resigned immediately." Marcus produced a thumb drive. Board meeting recordings, emails, financial reports, everything I could legally take when I left. "I've been waiting for someone to build a case." He looked at Ashley. "Your firm handles class actions, correct?" That evening, Sarah Johnson called Robert unexpectedly. "Walter gave me your number," she said, voice tense. "Someone's been asking questions about my documentation." "Be careful. When I started gathering evidence, strange things happened. My car was vandalized, my mail disappeared, and once I found someone had entered my house while I was at work." "Did you report it?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "To whom?" "The local police captain's wife sits on Patricia's garden committee. They dismissed everything as unfortunate coincidences. Robert thanked her for the warning, then checked his security system. The cameras showed Patricia's car driving slowly past his house, the third time that day. His laptop pinged with an email notification. The subject line read, "Meeting agenda change." The message from the board secretary announced a new item for discussion. Proposal to exercise eminent domain for community enhancement project, corner lot acquisition. Robert forwarded the email to Ashley with a single question. "Can they do this?" Her response came quickly. "No, but they're hoping you don't know that. They're getting desperate." As midnight approached, Robert's doorbell rang. His security camera showed Alina on his porch, looking frightened. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," she said when he opened the door, "but you need to see this." She handed him a glossy brochure titled Oak Ridge Estates Enhancement Initiative. Inside was an architectural rendering of a grand entrance monument and garden, positioned exactly where his house currently stood. "They distributed these at the garden club meeting tonight," Alina whispered. "Patricia announced funding has been secured and that the project would begin sooner than expected." Robert stared at the brochure, noting the small print at the bottom, "Final property acquisition pending." The certified letter from Ashley's law firm landed in every Oak Ridge mailbox simultaneously, a strategic move to prevent Patricia from intercepting communications. The document detailed potential legal action against the association for harassment, fraud, and civil rights violations, requesting a special meeting to address governance concerns. Robert spent the day preparing his presentation, organizing evidence into clear, compelling exhibits. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from neighbors who had received the letter, some supportive, others fearful, many simply confused. Alina arrived that evening with news. "Patricia's been calling emergency board meetings all day. 3 members couldn't attend, so she couldn't establish a quorum for official actions." "That's actually perfect," Robert replied. "It means she can't rush through any last-minute rule changes." As darkness fell, headlights swept across Robert's living room window. Patricia's luxury sit-in parked directly in front of his house, a deliberate breach of her own rules about visitor parking. He watched through the security camera as she straightened her blazer, checked her reflection, and approached his door with practiced confidence. Robert let her knock twice before answering. "This is highly unnecessary," Patricia began without preamble, her voice honey with forced reasonableness. "These misunderstandings could be resolved privately, without involving the entire neighborhood." Robert gestured to his security camera. "I'm recording this conversation, just so we're clear." Something flickered behind Patricia's eyes. Calculation, not fear. "Of course. Transparency is always welcome." She produced a folder from her designer handbag. "I've brought a proposal that should satisfy everyone involved." Inside was a purchase agreement for his property, 15% below market value, with a clause releasing the association from all liability claims. A bank check for $5,000 was paper-clipped to the corner as earnest money. "My investor colleague is prepared to be extremely generous," Patricia explained. "You'd be free to relocate without these unfortunate tensions, and the association would benefit from a beautiful new entrance feature. Everyone wins." "And who exactly is this investor?" Robert asked, already knowing the answer. Patricia waved dismissively. "Various investment partners. The point is, this offers you a clean exit from a situation that could become lengthy and unpleasant. Like what happened to the Johnsons, and the Rivers, and the 4 other families you forced out." Robert's calm tone seemed to unnerve her more than anger would have. "I've simply facilitated beneficial property transfers," Patricia replied, her smile tightening. "The association has enhancement needs, and not every homeowner appreciates the direction of progress. And your son-in-law's companies profiting from each transaction is just coincidence." Patricia's composure slipped momentarily. "You're making accusations without understanding the complexities of neighborhood development." "I understand enough to know that tomorrow's meeting will be enlightening for everyone," Robert replied, returning the folder unopened. "I appreciate your visit, but I'm not interested in selling." As Patricia turned to leave, she delivered a final warning. "Consider carefully before tomorrow. Not everyone who's challenged me has found the experience rewarding. Robert closed the door, immediately calling Ashley. She just left, offered to buy me out, and suggested consequences if I proceed with tomorrow's meeting. Perfect, Ashley replied. That's exactly what we needed. An attempt to resolve a harassment campaign with a lowball purchase offer. Did your cameras capture everything? Every word, Robert confirmed. Then we have the final piece, Ashley said. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be intense. As Robert set his phone down, a notification appeared from his security system. Outside, Patricia remained in her car, making calls. Through his window, their eyes met briefly in silent acknowledgement of the battle ahead. The transformation of Oak Ridge Estates continued through summer into fall. With Patricia gone and a new board in place, the neighborhood began healing from years of manufactured discord. The once feared HOA meetings became community gatherings where resident input was genuinely welcomed, not merely tolerated. Robert found himself unexpectedly central to this revival. His technological expertise proved valuable in creating a transparent online portal where all association documents, finances, and decisions were accessible to every homeowner. The new system automatically notified residents of proposed rule changes, allowing adequate time for feedback before implementation. One crisp October evening, Robert hosted a barbecue for the neighbors who had supported him during the confrontation. Alina arrived with her famous apple pie. Walter and his granddaughter Ashley brought wine, and Marcus Reed, now reinstated as a board member, carried a folder of documents. The state investigation is officially expanding, Marcus announced as they gathered on Robert's patio. They found similar patterns in 3 other developments where Patricia's family had connections. The prosecutor believes this could become a landmark case against HOA fraud. Ashley nodded. Several former residents have joined our civil suit as well. The settlement discussions are promising. We're pushing for full compensation for everyone who sold under duress. Walter raised his glass. I never thought I'd live to see justice here. My wife would have been proud to see Oak Ridge becoming a community again instead of Patricia's personal fiefdom. As twilight settled, Robert noticed a moving truck outside Patricia's former residence. The house had remained vacant for months following her hasty departure, its pristine exterior gradually showing signs of neglect that would have once triggered her immediate citations. New neighbors? Robert asked Alina, who had maintained her role as the neighborhood's unofficial welcome ambassador. A young family with twins, she replied. Lovely people who were actually afraid to buy here because of Oak Ridge's reputation. I assured them things had changed. Later, while cleaning up, Robert found Sarah Johnson standing by his vegetable garden, which had flourished into an impressive display that neighboring children visited to learn about growing food. I never thought I'd feel comfortable here again, she admitted, touching a ripe tomato. But when I heard what happened, I knew I wanted to come home. Robert smiled. The garden committee is looking for new members, if you're interested. We're creating a neighborhood sustainable food program. Committee? Sarah laughed. I thought those were disbanded. We've reimagined them, Robert explained. They're genuine volunteer groups now, not enforcement mechanisms. The garden committee's first project was helping replant everyone's non-approved plants that had been removed under Patricia's reign. As his guests departed, Robert sat alone on his porch, watching fireflies rise above the newly installed community playground. The monument garden Patricia had envisioned for his property had been redesigned as a modest welcome sign at the neighborhood entrance, created with input from all residents. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Former HOA president indicted on fraud charges and property scheme. The accompanying photo showed Patricia leaving a courthouse, her usual confident demeanor replaced with tight-lipped anxiety. Robert put the phone away, preferring instead to enjoy the sounds of children playing down the street and neighbors chatting across adjoining yards, simple interactions that had been discouraged during Patricia's era of surveillance and suspicion. A delivery truck pulled up, bringing the custom mailbox he'd ordered, not the mandatory brass finish model 772 from Patricia's manual, but a whimsical design featuring native birds that would have once triggered immediate fines. It perfectly matched his newly painted front door, a vibrant blue that reflected both his personal taste and his hard-won freedom to express it.